Hello. Well, as it says on the screen, I'm Peter Anderson, and I was interviewed by Lucy for It's Nice That a couple of months ago, and she's really sort of looked into some of the work I'd done quite a long time ago, and it's sort of quite a historic piece. And tonight I thought that I'd quite like to do something different, so I want to talk about using a specific camera, which is a Widelux camera. But before I get to that, I'm actually going to show you some of the old work. But as well as the old work, this is a film which a friend made of me recently, and one of the things which I have, it might be expected I sort of champion the idea of using film and old processes, but I absolutely love technology, and I think it's wonderful that the technology has enabled this film to be made, which is made in the darkroom, and to be able to make a film in the darkroom has to be digital, and it's wonderful. And after making a lot of photographs for a long time, I decided a few years ago I'd actually like to print some of the photographs, because the negatives I always have, but they were always just stored away in my darkroom or left in really untidy boxes in a terrible mess. And I decided that I'd actually like to print some of the photographs, so I got stuck into printing, which you can see here, and hands-on, I made some photographic dishes out of sheets of shuttering plywood, and the developers put onto with buckets and dirty old developer, and that's me with some gloves on, which is quite good. I don't always wear gloves working, and as you'll see in the film of me with the Widelux camera, I've got messy hands. One of the things that I love about photography is the magic of it, and apart from the magic of being able to capture an image, it's also the magic of when a print is made. And this is some of it. This is just some little short cuts out of a film which a friend of mine made a couple of years ago. And the film's called Available Light, and it's on Vimeo, and it's also can be found on a website which is Sighthound Films, and the filmmaker John Edwards. So this is after the print's made, and now it's going to be hung up. So it's all completely hands-on. So the prints are 1,500 by 1,200 millimeters, and as you see, it was just done in a tray made of plywood with a bucket of developer, and there it is. Some of my old work, which I worked for a long time, and is covered by the interview which Lucy made, and I tended to make a lot of all the photographs that I probably have tended to not remember most, but have become popular for me and other people have seen them, tend to be quite often full-face portraits. And a lot of them are black and white, but the black and white is because actually, if I use black and white, which was relevant at the time, I worked for a music paper, NME, a long time ago when it was a really interesting paper, and a bit like, it just covered a lot of things. It covered a lot of things like film, fashion, as well as music and politics and events and people, and a bit like Nicer Tuesdays. And I tended to find that, so that a lot of the work was black and white at the time, because when it got to the stage of trying to reproduce colour in newspapers, at that stage it was really bad, and everyone all the photographers strived to keep working in black and white, which was, for us, quite important at the time. But also it meant that with no digital, you had to go to a job, make a photograph, rush off to a darkroom, some sort of makeshift darkroom somewhere, process the film in print, and then go and deliver it to the office the next morning or sometime the same day. And quite a tall order, but we all coped with it and ran around like mad. So I photographed a lot of people, but the thing about the black and white was I always kept the negatives because I processed them myself, and the colour stuff got a bit lost because it was transparencies at the time, and I would hand it over to the client and never see it again. So the gist of this is all sort of full-face photographs. Another aspect of photography I got really interested in was what else happens at the edge of the frame of something. It's not just all the full face. And I had, when I was at college, I was at Royal College in London a long time ago, and in the cupboard there was a camera called a Widelux, and occasionally you could try and borrow it, and I used it a few times and quite liked it, but I didn't really find a sort of application for it. But then when I started working and doing jobs and working for record companies, I just occasionally would decide, I'll try and do something with a Widelux camera. So I these photographs, I should talk about these ones. I went to America, all over America actually, and somebody had given me some vouchers. They were working with a band and they had some vouchers for a tour that got cancelled. So I went all over America and stayed in all the hotels with these vouchers. And I was really interested in street photography. But I didn't want to just make photographs in the street. I wanted to have a reason for it. So I started to compile a set of photographs of people with portable music. And, you know, New York, San Francisco, which is quite interesting, the contrast in New York and San Francisco there. And I then, you know, coming back to London, I made some photographs, working photographs, commissioned, Notting Hill Carnival. And one of the things I realised, I always like the extra things that happen in the photograph and the things which you can't set up. And it just has to be what you capture in the moment. And I just think it's brilliant, just all these people in a photograph doing different things. And one of the photographers that probably inspired me at that time was American photographer William Klein. And he made photographs, street photographs, in Tokyo, New York, Rome, and Madrid and Paris, I think. And quite famous photographer, worth researching. And there's also a lot of things happened in his photographs, a lot of extra little detail. So that led to the thing that I had to commission me a photograph of Mick Jagger, and he hadn't said anything for a while at the time. And I went along to a press call, and I'd never been to one before, so it was a situation where about 20 or 30 photographers were given 10 minutes to witness Mick Jagger making a performance at the back of a nightclub in Soho. And my instant reaction was, do I make the picture for the job, make a picture of Mick Jagger's face, or do I document the scene? So I think I did both, and I quite liked that. I mean, it sort of inspired me, and it's just brilliant, the idea of, you know, whatever else is going on in the scene, like the guy behind him with his camera, and it just was just a great thing to do, really. And that photograph was since, you know, it was used in NME. It was also used in a Rolling Stones book at one time. And in talking about trying to use the camera, I'd use it for jobs. So I did it in the early 80s. I did a lot of work with the Style Council, Paul Weller's band. So I decided at one time I would actually use a Widelux camera. So this is a Widelux camera, and one of the things with Widelux camera is it's a panoramic camera which can make a wide-angle image without distortion if you use it in a conventional way, which, i.e., put it on a tripod and look at the spirit level on the top and make sure it's absolutely horizontal and flat. But I couldn't do that. I just had to hold it and hope for the best. And hoping for the best is the exciting thing to me. But it would work, and so this was... It became one of the things I loved about it. It was almost like being put into a situation of using a camera which was almost making like you were in there as sort of still from a film or something. And you know, nowadays panoramic cameras can be operated from your phone, which is brilliant. There's software which stitches an image together and you get an instant panorama. But then there was nothing like this. It was just an odd camera. So I'm now going to show you the camera. And this is the camera. It's an old Japanese camera, and this is a small film made with a friend last week of me loading the film into the camera. The film it's a 35mm camera, and the film has to wind right around the barrel in the back of the camera so that when the lens moves at the front, it's always, it means that the image is always in focus, if it's used conventionally. So that's the Widelux camera. So I'm now going to show some examples of using Widelux camera. Again, commissioned job. This is a portrait of a metalworker, sculptor, artist, builder called Joe Rush, and he's sort of infamous for some of his work of large-scale sculptures and some of the objects that are used in festivals like Glastonbury. And this was in one of his workshops where he lived in the workshop and had all the things he makes. He makes robots, toys, machines, everything and anything out of metal usually, furniture. And it was great to be able to go along with the Widelux camera and capture him, but everything around him in his environment. He lived in a caravan on some stilts above all the workshop, of which one of the things that's quite interesting with the Widelux camera is that, to me, is that certain areas, if you use it in a certain way, you can create a sort of focal point at the center of a frame or at the side of the frame, and then there's still all the extra things going on. And one thing is that if it's used conventionally as a panoramic camera, using a tripod, everything will be in focus and you've got a wide image. I couldn't use it at all that way, as I've said, so it becomes distorted. And the images really become distorted. This is Joe with his dog Fitz and his caravan behind. Again, doing work with it, not just playing with it as a sort of hobby. I actually used it a lot for work, and I made some photographs for an organisation called The Big Wheel that were in charge of all the promotion of public transport in Nottingham. And it's quite interesting, the thing about me saying the camera distorting things and using it as a bad viewpoint. The wonderful distortions are we can get flows of things, and this was a campaign which is all about public transport and how people got around. So it included bikes, it included, just wonderful distortions can be really interesting. And it also included trains, buses, and I had a lot of photographs of bendy buses and really distorted buses. I couldn't find them to bring it here, but there's a bent boat on the river, which is quite interesting. And there was part of the campaign was about park and ride, and I think it's quite interesting the way that the cameras managed to capture the detail of the drivers have got on the bus happily and left their cars behind, and they're all sort of reflected in the side of the windows of the bus as well. And that's another thing that I find extra, where there's something which, using a camera like that, you can't premeditate what you're going to get from it. You just have to point the camera in a direction and accept something, and then look at it afterwards and think, oh wow, I've got all that reflection. I think that can be quite an exciting thing, really. Another thing about more reflections, so the reflections become even more intricate, and it doubles image. I decided recently to go and try and go to a place that I love and make some images with the Widelux camera and try and capture something there. And it's a place called Santa Pod where there's drag racing, and cars drive down a track of a quarter of a mile, and they can actually, from a standing start, get down a quarter of a mile in less than 4 seconds, which is quite impressive. And one of the most impressive things about it is, if you can imagine that, it's the noise, the sound, noise, sound, the smell, the speed, and the sound and the actual thrust of a car getting up to speed from standing start. It actually shakes right through your body. And I didn't have a kind of camera which can somehow capture that action, so I decided to do something different. So I would go into the pits at Santa Pod and photograph cars, they're all completely built by hand and with a great pride, and there's no huge, great sponsorship, but there's absolutely beautiful objects, almost like art objects. So using my Widelux camera, I thought, well, if I even distort them even more, to me they'll be really interesting, and hopefully to other people as well. And it's the thing about the distortion, and capturing something in the foreground, which is the car, but then there's all the things going on in the periphery I find interesting. This is one of the things that I had found really interesting, was all the cars were painted, and now there's a whole new thing which is wraps. And this is a car which completely intact body, but the paintwork on it is photographed from another car which was taken out of a barn and photographed and then wrapped onto this one, which is quite interesting. It's not shiny and super slick anymore. It's a bit falling apart by looks. And one of the things about these photographs is that I travelled a lot, and I started off making photographs in New York, and I worked a lot in America when I worked in the music business, and this is not America. This is middle of England. The one thing that's really hard in the middle of England sometimes is that the weather is not conducive to drag racing. But, it can look quite good. That's painted, which is amazing. A low rider that actually was driving, but obviously couldn't be any bumps around. And that's the camera I just put on the floor, which and the thing about the wide camera was that I keep saying it because this whole thing about it is so much imagery can be found, and just little details, and to be able to pick up the driver. There's some really interesting graphics which put it into a sort of time slot and all sorts of things. This is Anita Makila with her car, and she's been driving drag civs in all over Europe for decades, and she's the person who has driven that car. I think that car actually went down that track at, I think, 3.4 seconds, which is just 3.4 seconds from a standing start for a quarter mile. It's quite phenomenal. And that's a classic example to me of the Widelux camera. There's the engine in the centre and focus, and then there's a narrative going on about mechanics on one side, and then there's a passerby posing on the other side. It just all happens, and it's quite interesting that in Kelly's talk, where one of her slogans was to focus, and I just thought it was really good, and it's just look up and focus on what you're looking on the subject matter. Don't look through the camera, and then there's a surprise at the end. Well, I'm going back to that one because I like it. And just be able to put subject matter right in the foreground and get everything else. Another woman driver there who's looking a bit bemused, because the thing about that camera is you need to be so close to the subject matter. And I've probably got the camera about 300 millimeters away from that engine. So the girl in the background's a bit bemused, what am I doing? But she's, I would be bemused at her, because she had driven that engine had just been taken out of a car which she had driven down the track, and it was her father's car, and her father allowed her to drive it, and she drove it down the track at 3.9 seconds, which is amazing. There's a lot of, there's a lot of imagery of interiors and kitchens and cooking and all sorts of things, and this is the sort of kitchen I like. The gas mask is because of the nitrous oxide, which is quite stinging in the eyes. And things are not always shiny. Some things do get a bit dilapidated. This is Fast Freddy's car. And Fast Freddy has this strange old rebuilt pickup truck that he keeps rebuilding and always brings it back and keeps going. And as you see written on the side, after it's crashed into the barriers at the side of the track, he's got written on it, "The show must go on." And I think it was the weather made him crash. You can see just on the way on the left-hand side, there's a rainbow in the sky. That's Fast Freddy. Fast Freddy's car. Fast Freddy's mechanics. And there's a fraud. Now, the other thing about drag racing is it's not always safe. Cars crash. And this is the bits of a car that have been laid out, and I call this photograph the ghouls, and it's all the people looking at all the parts lying out. But the parts are lying out because they're trying to collect some money to rebuild it. Another subject matter, and this was, again, trying to make photographs where there would be interesting subject matter, which is, to me, lots of people and maybe machines. So I went to an agricultural fair in France, which is just a spectacular place for the Widelux camera. You can choose your chainsaw there. And one time I was in France, and northwest France, and it was a sort of Saturday afternoon, and this photograph reminds me of it. And it was Saturday afternoon and getting dark in November, and walking down the street, and a lot of little French towns are pretty quiet and dead, but there's a bit of action in a butcher's shop, and it was 3 butchers were actually, mock fighting or really fighting with chainsaws. That was France. And again, it's like that thing that I love. It's just a memory of it could be a French film, and I quite like the photographs of Widelux camera become a bit like films, or as if you're in a film. I think it was a grass cutting machine. And I find it sort of amusing in a way to myself, just that these photographs, because of the way they're taken and the black and white film, they look a bit sort of historic. They could be in the 50s or the 40s or something, but that was actually last year. People like to get in amongst machines. Just looking at things, and the sort of Americana for me was quite, I quite liked it a few years ago. I used to work a lot in America, and it was just occasionally I might take the Widelux camera and something like American trucks, all big and shiny, which they are everywhere now, but at that time it seemed only in America was a place you'd find something like that. And it just, and again, it just added to by the bad distortion by the handheld camera. And this is one of these places that to me always seemed quite a nice place because the sun shines and there's palm trees, but that's notorious sort of southeast LA. And the Widelux camera can go on the beach as well, and in the sea. And to the motocross, and that's showing it as, using it as a panoramic camera, the whole thing, the whole panorama. And then it can get right in amongst people, and this is the sort of, I sort of mentioned that whole thing about inspired by somebody like William Klein, and he just went right in amongst people when he photographed them. I suppose it's a bit like using a GoPro, but that was just an old camera. And I actually thought that, one of the things I talked about, all the little details, but sometimes there isn't any little details, and a landscape like a beach in France is just an empty landscape. And I know that I've got, friends, lovers that actually love looking at dog photographs. So I thought I'd put in a few dog photographs for them. And the dog actually couldn't be captured with the camera because the camera's not fast enough and he moves too fast, so I had to wait till he was tired. But he's run across the whole landscape. Totally tired because he's run for miles, very fast, almost as fast as a dragster. Again, just sort of being able to capture a wide image, and sort of always been, as well as making a lot of photographs of people, I quite liked the idea that I'd make photographs of people, places and things. And this is another thing I always liked, was sort of degraded urban landscapes. And I quite like this in particular because it's a situation I found which is actually gone now, but it was a whole unfinished holiday village which started crumbling, but the graffiti artists really creative at the place, and as you can see, there's a picture postcard of the town called Peru, and a girl in bikini, sort of classic postcard on the end of a building there. And I think that's quite an astonishing piece of graffiti to find in sort of totally rural France somewhere, and beyond pollution. And the wide camera can just capture so much, going into a house and all the roof and vegetation and everything. But I actually thought that there were some photographs I took quite a long time ago, and just really trying to use the camera in a really odd way. And these were photographs taken in the tunnel in Greenwich, and it's really interesting that the camera, being a wide, could actually get to both ends of the tunnel, but the corner is non-existent. That is a flat wall, and it also it just it fits the moment. 1980, I took these photographs of a band called The Last Few Days. There was the question asked by me by Jenny from It's Nice, and she said, "Well, how can you deal with the camera if it's if the subject matter's moving? It's really slow exposure." Well, that's what happens, which is really quite exciting, really, because it's got 3 settings. It's got a 250th of a second, a 125, and a 15th. The 15th would normally be too slow to hand hold, especially when the lens is moving, because the lens goes bzzz, well, it goes bzzz, but it makes exciting images. The other thing I hadn't really mentioned at all, I always treated panoramic as horizontal, but panoramic can be vertical, and I didn't really put an awful lot into this because it's widescreen, and I think that the vertical maybe is just too difficult to visualize, but here it is, the camera used vertically. Again, back in the tunnel, which has got 2 sides of the tunnel and the rest. And then I did some sort of harder, more miserable work with the camera as well, where I was asked to crucify this guy. And so I crucified him in my studio and then made the photographs with the Widelux camera. And that's all I've got to say. So thank you for watching.